Hey guys, welcome back to the Gut Girls podcast. We are so excited for today's topic. We are diving into the GI map stool test. And before you guys roll your eyes and think they're talking about that poop test again, we want you guys to stay close visual attention to this one because we're actually going to be pulling up the GI map and several of the sections of the GI map, and we're going to target some of those symptoms that you guys just can't get answers for today. So we are so excited to give you some inside look.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we talk a lot about my journey in 2017. And I remember you saying, hey, I'm going to ship you this kit and you're going to do a stool test. And I'm like, what? So when I first did that GI map test, and I still remember the call when I was sitting at my kitchen table and we had the conversation, and I finally had some answers because my stool test showed that I had low digestive enzymes, an overgrowth of bacteria, certain bacteria, and lots of different markers that just explained why I was tired all the time, why my joints hurt, why I was constipated, why I was tired all the time, right? I mean, all of those things came from the GI map test, and I was absolutely blown away. And so, before this test, I thought I was broken, and after, speaking with you, I was like, I finally have a roadmap to healing. And I really truly believe that whether you're experiencing symptoms or whether you're just trying to optimize health and you're doing so many things right, the GI map test could really be the last piece of the puzzle for you. So I'm going to just dive in because this is Angela's bread and butter. When we talk about knowing how to look at this stool test, she is such a great coach and expert at really teaching our clients how to look at this GI map test for themselves and learn how to sort of become a little bit of a mini gut expert. So she is going to dive into a few of those tests today. So I'm going to start with the very first one. It's the pathogens page. That's what the first thing on the GI map test is going to kind of look for. It's looking for things like salmonella. You guys on the podcast have probably heard some of these words like C. diff, parasites, viruses, those kind of things. So if you can't figure out, what foods are making you sick, why you're running to the bathroom immediately after you're eating, why you seem to keep getting a stomach bug over and over again. So Angela, let's dive in. I want to see a little bit more about these pathogens and help us understand what we're looking at here.
Absolutely. So you guys, just to confirm, can see my pathogen page here, right?
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you.
Okay. This is like Christmas morning for me. So hang tight, y'all. So, okay, pathogens, let me just explain. You guys, if you're looking at this, you've heard of C. diff, you've heard of E. coli, you've heard of salmonella. And so I think the biggest question we get around this is like, where did I pick this up from? And that's a great question. What I say in response to that is I'm not so worried where you picked this up from. I'm more concerned as to why it's lingering. Why is it sticking around? Why is your body loving to be now the host of this pathogen? I think that's the bigger question. And I'll go back though to answer, your dying question of where did I pick this up? Honestly, guys, these can be picked up almost anywhere. We know that C. diff can come from like a hospital acquired environment. But heck, you could pick it up on as much as I hate to say this, because I have littles too, from a daycare. You could pick this up from anything, you know what I mean? So this isn't just hospital acquired, but yeah, these pathogens are all around us. E. coli, as you guys know, salmonella can come from, a foodborne illness, type of exposure. So these are very, very common. So when you do the GI map and you see them, honestly, I'm not as surprised. Diana, we get people that are like, oh my gosh, I saw page 1 and I've got C. diff. Let me dive into this for a second. The toxin A and B that you see here, what those actually represent is the C. diff itself, the pathogen strain, holds the genetic component, because remember, this is like a DNA, this is qPCR, quantitative PCR. So it holds the DNA potential of having toxin A and B. It doesn't mean that you are like sepsis, right, Diana? I mean, we have people that, if let me say this, if you wouldn't be doing a stool test and waiting 2 weeks to get the results back, right? So when you see this, don't think like, oh my gosh, this person needs to absolutely get to the hospital right now. Sure, there are people that C. diff can make very, very sick and they need, urgent care. But there's also people that carry this and are not symptomatic, believe it or not. And so, like Diana said, this could be, one of those educational findings where you're like, oh man, but I don't feel like I have C. diff, but yet I am constantly looking for the bathroom, you know what I mean, at all times. And so maybe that's how it's presenting in your body. So when you see this, it's not as scary for us as it may be for you, but it definitely gives us insight as to why is your body hosting this? Why is it sticking around? That's really what we want to get to, because these guys will weaken your immune system. So this is our pathogen page this is the GI map pathogen page. And we can get a lot of insight on this first page. And I will say one more thing before we move on from this page of, Diana, this is typically when someone goes to, a GI doc to get some labs ran. Oftentimes I'll have clients say to me, I had a stool test done and it showed that nothing was there. That's a little bit different. As Diana said, this is, the test that can change everything, because it gives you a deeper insight, not to just these pathogens. This is what typical GI doctors will test for. They want to kind of help you rule out the most acute things like C. diff and E. coli and salmonella. But sometimes that's where those tests can stop. And so we're about to blow your minds with what else this test can kind of give us insight on. So I'll let you, Diana, take back over.
Yeah. So one thing that you mentioned on here was talking about a weakened immune system. And so if we move forward, the next page on the GI map test shows us our good bacteria, or our commensal bacteria. And so these are the ones that produce the short chain fatty acids. These are the ones that even produce, make things like the neurotransmitters for serotonin, And this is the one that helps keep the immune system balanced, right? So when you're feeling, fatigued, constantly run down, maybe inflamed, but a lot of times we see this with our highly anxious people too. And this is where, this commensal bacteria, if it's not in balance, they are feeling that anxiety, right? So tell us a little bit more about that. And when you do, I really want you to kind of talk to us a little bit about probiotics specifically, because, I have a lot of people, having worked in this industry now for quite some time, for many years, I have so many people that are like, I'm taking this probiotic or that probiotic, or sometimes they say I'm taking the same probiotic for a really long time. Oh, I'm fine. I take probiotics, but they don't know which one to take. So tell us here on this commensal or good bacteria page, tell us a little bit more about that and probiotics.
Absolutely. Those are great questions. So, the commensal, a lot of people don't necessarily think to test for these, but like Diana said, I mean, if you don't have good commensal, your immune system could be depleted, and that would allow you then to host potentially like that pathogen page that we just saw for longer than you would want to. And so if you actually look here, if you guys are looking at this visual, if you see lactobacillus is fifth one down. Lactobacillus is the fifth one down.
We actually lost you, so if you can pull it back up for us.
Here, wait, let me go back.
This is what happens when we do recordings, right?
And I get finger happy. Here, I'm going to go right back to it 1 second. So let me make sure it was there, and then here we go. Okay, commensal.
Yeah, the commensal.
Okay, so if you're looking with me, I think I got finger happy, which happens over here.
We still don't have it for some reason.
Oh, how about this one here?
All right. Okay, we're back to the commensal there.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so if you look at like the fourth or fifth one down, you see lactobacillus, and that is the probiotic that I mean, Diana, it's like in every probiotic over the counter, right? Like lactobacillus and bifidobacterium. Those are, if you look, I guarantee if y'all go to your pantry right now and you have a probiotic, you're going to see those two strains in the probiotic. They're the most common. But what if you have someone whose lactobacillus and bifido are doing okay? Like, look at this one. This lactobacillus is actually in the green. The bifidobacteria is actually not too bad in the green. It's these other things like Akkermansia, Faecalibacterium prausnitzii. It's these bacteria that really this particular client needs to focus on. But how would they know that unless they tested, right? And what's so awesome about this profile, guys, is this is Akkermansia, which you guys, if you've listened to us talk before a little bit about GLP-1, Akkermansia right here is actually one of the strains that can help stimulate GLP-1 in your body, which is like a natural hormone that you secrete. Everyone's been hearing about, that's a hot topic now. And so what's awesome is you can actually get an inside look at a strain that potentially could stimulate that hormone. And where is it at? On this person, below DL means below detectable limit. So we've got some work to do here that we can do naturally. And that's not going to be found in your typical over-the-counter probiotic like Diana mentioned. And then just to give you an idea, the phyla here, you guys, some of these names sound like Starbucks drinks to you, and that's okay. But the phyla down here, there's two categories that make up 90% of your good bacteria. So look at this profile for a second. Both of these are low. So that tells us that this client is missing 90% of their good bacteria. I mean, that's epic, right? That's a huge loss. That would explain why this person could constantly be getting sick, not being able to shake the common cold when it comes around, or, when flu season hits, they're constantly sick. This could also explain those constant food sensitivities, right? That someone is facing and they can't get answers to. And you can do the biggest elimination diet that you want, but if you don't rebuild these guys back up, you're not going to actually get to the root of that problem. And then the last thing I want to mention here is some of these bacteria, like this one, Enterobacter, they actually speak a little bit more deeply about the gut lining. So if you want an inside look at how is your gut lining holding up, which is awesome to see after antibiotic use, like chronic antibiotic use, this, and even guys after a big exposure to a virus, this could give you so much insight as to how your body handled that and what your gut lining looks like after that. So this is actually one of my favorite parts of the GI map.
Yeah, so if you're like me, and back in 2016, 2017, when I was like, man, what is wrong with me? And I stumbled upon leaky gut, these are some of those commensal bacteria that matter if you think you have leaky gut. So I want to kind of keep going forward, because I want to show kind of the opposite side, or the opportunistic side. So when we talk about gut dysbiosis, that's just kind of a fancy word that we've learned over the years, right? That shows sort of an imbalance, right? And so when we talk about dysbiosis and overgrowth, tell us a little bit more about that, because there's some markers on here it's staph, it's strep, it's Pseudomonas, some of those markers. And so a lot of times people that have come to us, they have already tried, like you said before, they've tried the elimination diet. They've started kind of like connecting possible foods to how they're reacting. And, they might even use words like histamine response, because, they've looked it up on Google or whatever. And so tell us a little bit more about dysbiosis, about overgrowth, about these opportunistic bacteria a little bit, and what all of that means.
Yeah, I mean, this is a great page. As you guys can see, if you know nothing about this test, you would say this test has a lot of highs, and there's a lot of what we'd say dysbiosis or overgrowth. And if you look at
We're not seeing it right now.
Oh, you're not? Guys, sorry. Give me a second.
So if you've been following along in our podcast now, This is episode 11, and the first 9, we did not show our faces or show our screens or anything like that. So we appreciate your patience in that. And now that Angela has it up, I'm going to let her keep talking about these bad guys.
Yeah, so these are opportunistic bacteria, which means if given the right opportunity. So think of what would be the right opportunity. What we just talked about, low immune system. Let's talk about pH. You guys have heard about people being more alkaline or acidic. So if the pH balance is off, or if their motility is slow, meaning that guys, food just sits in your GI tract. It doesn't have this solid rate from mouth to anus that it should to go through. It's just sitting there, so it's stagnant, right? Those types of opportunities then allow these microbes to grow, and some of these. If you guys can look, if you take a minute to kind of slow down and look at these titles, like look at this one here, inflammatory and autoimmune related bacteria. So my goodness, this could answer so many things. Dana, I remember we had a client who had Citrobacter right here, and it was elevated, and her complaint was reoccurring UTIs, and she could not get to the bottom of it. She was doing antibiotics. She was actually doing Botox injections at one point for her urinary tract because she had so much incontinence due to these UTIs that just coming. And we got to do this test and we saw Citrobacter was so high. And in the research, Citrobacter can be linked to reoccurring UTIs. That was a game changer for her. She got to get off of her antibiotics because she really got to treat the root cause. And so things like that, Klebsiella, guys, these are inflammatory. Klebsiella in research can be linked to like rheumatoid arthritis, that systemic inflammatory autoimmune joint pain that you struggle with. And I will say this, just because you have these bacteria does not mean you have what they correlate to in research. It just means that it's basically living in the GI tract and creating this inflammatory response that could eventually trigger a gene that you got passed down from, your genetics. And so that's what it means. And then for some people, they come to us and that gene has been turned on. And so they are symptomatic, but you're not always symptomatic up front. Proteus in research down here is linked to IBS. So that's irritable bowel syndrome. So when you get to see this and how the inflammation can impact you systemically, it's absolutely amazing. If I go up to the top here, Pseudomonas, you guys, this one we see a lot, and I just want to talk about it for a second. People will come to us and say like, hey, I've had to give up gluten because I react to it so much, but yet they're not celiacs. And I think people out there think you're either celiacs or you're not. And that's not true. You can actually have an overgrowth like Pseudomonas in your body that what it does is it triggers this oral intolerance to food. So what that means in other terms is it makes you highly sensitive to foods. Pseudomonas in research has a particular link to gluten. So we see this all the time where someone has Pseudomonas and they've come to us saying, I can't eat gluten, but yet they're not celiac. But now they have some education around the concept, right? That's our goal, is just to educate you based on these findings. Staph and strep, we've had kids, Diana, I think, that have done our GI map with recurring strep that they've had to have antibiotics like several times a year, like almost once a quarter, because of reoccurring strep throat. And now this is not like a one-to-one correlation if you have strep here on the test that you have strep throat, you guys, but the family there of strep, there's this correlation of weakness in the GI tract and the intestines, and so it could bring out this reoccurring infection like strep throat. And I remember a particular client that we helped educate around this topic, and they were able to support their immune system, support their good bacteria, and the child is no longer on antibiotics for strep throat. Her mom does not have to fear her going back to school every year because she knew what that meant for her with doctor visits. So this is an awesome page. I love this page.
Yeah, I mean, this is so cool. You just hit on a lot of the a lot of the things that people come to us for, it's achy joints. I mean, it kind of goes back to even my story a little bit. The achy joints, the recurring sicknesses and things like that I was experiencing that I never correlated at all to my gut. And then getting to run a GI map test and see literally what's going on was so nice to see. And really kind of have some answers and then a roadmap and a plan moving forward. And so I want to move on to yeast. Everybody, I feel like there's people that have started looking into gut health and really started looking at their symptoms and why they have brain fog and why they feel like they crave sugar all the time. And then they are like, oh, maybe I have yeast. And so this page here gives a little bit of indication as to like why they're maybe experiencing some of those kind of symptoms.
Yeah. So just to confirm, y'all can see my page, right?
We got it.
Okay. So yeah, on the test itself, it shows a few versions here of yeast and fungus. And so you can see the one that's highlighted here for this client is Candida. My goodness, Candida, let me just explain this for a second to y'all, because you may not have any idea the depth of what yeast can do to the gut. It can overtake the gut. Candida, yeast in general, what it does is it basically it figures out how to live in a way that it is almost untouchable. It doesn't mean it's all yeast is resistant, but it creates this huge biofilm. So if you guys don't know, biofilm is basically like this umbrella that the organism then lives under so that it's protected from things that will kill it, like stomach acid. And what Candida can do is actually host other organisms under its biofilm. So most of the time we don't just see Candida, and this is why I constantly preach the need to do a big overhaul look of the gut, like through something like the GI map, because if you just went and got tested for yeast, you don't know what else is growing underneath the biofilm. And I'm going to jump for a second, Diana, but I'll share my screen and hopefully it works here. But if you guys can see now H. pylori on this page, can you see that?
We do, yeah.
Okay, so Candida is actually known to cover up H. pylori, which is another bacteria. And actually, the H. pylori lives in the stomach or duodenum area. So when a lot of times, this is not a one-to-one, this is just some education around Candida in general. A lot of times when you see Candida, there's other organisms like this that live underneath it. And we don't get to see the whole amount of H. pylori like this here. This one is actually high, but sometimes what happens is you get rid of, or let's say suppress, the yeast, or you work to get your immune system back up and your good bacteria up, and it changes the yeast level. Let's say that if you do that, all of a sudden we'll have a client repeat the GI map and H. pylori is even higher than what it is, like what you see right now. And a client will be like, my goodness, I didn't have that on the first test. Where did it come from? And we have to remind them that the gut is like an onion. You peel back layer by layer. But when you see yeast, just be prepared for so much to be hiding underneath of it. It can be a real beast of the GI tract. And like you said, Diana, it can really cause, obviously skin issues. I mean, we see a lot of yeast rashes, but also think of like the brain fog. Think of the brain fog when you have yeast and you're not digesting carbohydrates, because yeast feeds off of sugar. You're essentially not firing on all four cylinders, right? So you end up having a lot of brain fog. You tend to be very reactive to a lot of carbohydrates, histamine foods. And so when you really do the GI map, you get to see both. You get to see yeast, but you get to see these other organisms like H. pylori that might thrive in conjunction with it. And then you get to see the whole picture versus maybe just spot treating one of these findings. And then the symptoms come back, 6 months later?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love that you kind of talk about the patterns and looking and explaining why carbohydrates aren't digested well and why you have brain fog, and you can really start to put this whole picture together when you look at somebody's stool test And it's just so interesting to me. I mean, even I've learned so much, and I mean, you're constantly learning too. And that's what we love about this is, the tests are getting more sophisticated and learning more and more about how to break down these biofilms and how to, again, create that roadmap for whatever shows up on your test.
I think that's important. I'm just going to step in there 1 second, Dinah. I think where sometimes people don't get the results that they want is we're not saying antibiotics are not helpful. We truly do believe they have a time and place, but if you've got this biofilm, guys, you've got to open it up first. You can't just throw, it's like throwing a bunch of darts at a dartboard and just hoping something sticks. But if you get to do the GI map and you see the level, like the exact level that's here, like for instance, if you're looking at this H. pylori, you get to see the exact number. I mean, you get to see the exact power of 10 that this is growing to, which then gives you a little bit of insight of like, I've got some work to do to open up this biofilm and really get to the bottom of it. So I think it also helps Diana set a realistic expectation for someone of like, okay, this might take me, 3 to 6 months versus one round of antibiotics, or this might take a round of antibiotics and some additional, work in my lifestyle and maybe some other supplementation to offset other things going on, right? Like it helps build the whole picture in your mind as well.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned that too, that the timing, a lot of times our programs, we can't have them be, 3-year programs or something, but it does take time. People say all the time, they're like, oh, I've been doing this for 3 weeks or, whatever. And I'm like, yeah, but you've been drinking 3 glasses of wine every single night for years. Or you eat sugar every morning. That's like you're eating tons of sugar even for breakfast. And so, we're like, you're unwinding sort of years and years that is now showing up on this stool test. So we're like, oh, just be patient. It will be worth the effort, the time, the money, the energy that you're putting into this and running this stool test. Just be patient and stay the course. Because it doesn't happen overnight. The healing doesn't happen overnight. And in fact, we're constantly healing, right, Angela? I mean, it's not a linear, health is not linear. We're constantly going to have things. I mean, we talked about Todd, getting a tick bite. And, there's going to constantly be things that come up in your life, and we have to be able to be ready for them. We have to educate ourselves. We have to have the right tools. And we believe that the GI map test is one of those tools. And that leads me to kind of your favorite part of the GI map test, because you always talk about how this is your favorite part, jumping to where it has the intestinal health markers, because that really can paint such a big picture after you've seen some of the other numbers. So tell us a little bit about the intestinal health markers and what this page shows for you, because it's just really fascinating.
It is, anyone can do a stool test. I think why this one stands out to me is because, you have all these lab values we just went through, but this test really breaks down of how it affects you particularly. So I have seen these intestinal health markers be all over the place. And so I want to share an insight of why they would be. So, this particular, if we start at the top here, you've got digestion. And so again, think if you were the client and you had all those markers we just went through previously, what does it do to you individually, your digestion? So steatocrit is a marker of how well you're absorbing your fat. It does speak to your bile salt. It speaks a lot to digestion, but again, for particular fats. And just to take it a step farther, I'm not just talking about like avocados and olive oil type of fat. I'm also talking about the deeper level of like when people have high cholesterol. That can actually, when you get to the I think the deeper part of like, why is that? Not for everyone, but for some people, it could be because there's this lack of fat digestion. Because remember, hormones, cholesterol, it is a fat, right? So some of that this could educate you around something that you're dealing with beyond just digestion. But since we're talking about digestion, steatocrit is a marker for fat. So if it's high, like you guys can see here, this one is not actually marked red, but the reference range over here is 15. So this one is creeping up. It's at 11. And that means that this particular client, a lot of their fat is coming out in their stool, which means that they're not digesting it fully. They're not getting the benefits of those healthy fats, which, my goodness, that can go back to hormone function, that can go back to healing, right? That can go back to so much, skin health, right? Like so much right here alone we get to see. The next one is elastase 1, and this is a marker for pancreatic output. So this is a very, one of my favorite markers because it answers a lot. So stick with me for a second, but you guys can see like this client definitely has a low level of elastase. And what that means in regards to a stool test, the pancreas has a lot of function, but in regards to a stool test is that it can secrete levels of enzymes like amylase, lipase, and protease. If you don't know what those are, that's okay. Those are enzymes that help you break down carbs, fats, and proteins. So if you're not secreting these enzymes, guys, you're not breaking down. You can have the best diet in the world, the best diet. If you're not secreting these enzymes, you're missing a big part of digestion. So this is where we see a lot of people have, stomach discomfort, bloating, digestive symptoms, more or less, that are just so severe. But we also see this when it comes to skin health. Actually, Diana and I were just talking about this, but you can see people have rashes, acne, and this marker could be an insight to us that, hey, you're not digesting your food well. And so it's going to show up, whether that is through digestive symptoms or acne or skin issues, because the food is basically just sitting in there, right? It's hanging out, it's stagnant, possibly fermenting, and now you've got those symptoms coming out through the skin itself. So elastase is one of my favorite markers to look at. In fact, what's also interesting, just as an educational point, you can see this actually lower on people that have been long-time vegans and vegetarians. And now we are not against that type of diet at all, but we do educate a lot that when you choose to live that lifestyle, there is in fact a lot of intention that needs to go into that lifestyle, because you may not be getting the enough vitamins like B vitamins and other vitamins that actually can stimulate some of these functions in the body. You may have lower stomach acid from eating that way for a long period of time if you're not doing it intentionally right or well. So sometimes we will see this come up in those types of clients. And so then we'll move on to the GI markers. Guys, this beta glucuronidase or B glucuronidase, amazing for like showing us how the findings on the previous pages are burdening the liver. So when you got, and Diana, we didn't even get to show the parasite page, but I'll jump to it for a hot second because people love parasites. And it has to do with this marker as well. But like you guys can see here, this client has high Dientamoeba fragilis. And I mean, it's high. It's all the way up to the exponential 7th. When you've got things like this growing, taking hold of the GI tract, you can see it actually like on the intestinal health markers if it's a big enough burden for their liver. So remember, this is where it's different for everyone else. Let's say you have someone that's got a parasite like this that's been chronically drinking wine or alcohol every night, or has been eating the standard American diet full of inflammatory foods. This parasite might show a bigger burden on the detoxification organ of the body, the liver, than it does on other people. So I think that's fascinating. Again, how this test can personalize, like how are these markers affecting you versus someone else? And I know y'all just lost it, so I'm going to go back up. And as I do that, let me continue though. There is another marker on this test called occult blood, or like the FIT marker, and that can show, and I might have to, oh, here it is, perfect. That can show if there's like blood in the stool. And again, guys, what's so awesome about this, Diana and I are here to educate you and connect you to other practitioners that can help you if we find something. And we have found stuff in here, guys. We have seen occult blood come back through the roof, and that is our like in our scope, we're like, hey, we need to get you to a gastroenterologist. Like there is something going on here, and they had no idea. You know what I mean? So like, it's just a good educational test. If we keep going, let me just skim through some of these, but like your secretory IgA, guys, this is your immune system. Okay. So this is your immune system, meaning like this is how you're able to hold up and show up in the world, right? If your immune system is low, you're not going to show up very well, right? Like you're going to struggle with food sensitivities, chronic sickness, my goodness, just not living optimally at all. And so we get to see this inside look of how is this bacteria affecting your immune response. This other marker, everyone does love this marker too, this anti-gliadin IgA, which tells us your response to gluten. This is not a test that tests for celiacs, guys, but it does allow you to see if you are having a high immune response to gluten or not. That is a huge insight for a lot of people when they're like, I've thought that, but I never had actual data to show me. And then this last one, the calprotectin, you guys can see it here. It is 713. Guys, this is a gold standard for inflammation in the colon. This would be a reason why we would tell you like, hey, you do need to get into that GI doc, or you do need to get this marker rebrand, because there is some heavy duty inflammation in the colon that is not healthy to have at this level at all. And we need to get to the root of this. But I will say this, in this stool test too, when there's pathogens like E. coli and C. diff and there's parasites, we often see that correlate with this high inflammatory number. So what's so interesting, and I'll stop here to just, not over educate, but to remind you guys that when you spot treat, so like if you go to your doctor, your GI doctor, and you get calprotectin ran and it is through the roof, that is a gold standard for irritable bowel disease. And so let's say that happened to you. Let's say your calprotectin was through the roof and it was like, hey, the GI doc may say like, hey, this looks like, irritable bowel. Let's see if you have the symptoms with it. Okay, you do. Let's treat this medically. We're not saying there's not a time and place for that medical treatment. What we are educating you around is, what if you took a deeper step and found like, hey, I do have pathogens and I do have parasites. If I actually worked to balance out my microbiome, could that calprotectin then balance out itself? You know what I mean? Like, absolutely, there's a chance of that. And so it actually just gives you another avenue to go down and help yourself, right, Diana?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I was just sitting here thinking is, even though this test can give you so much insight, we are not gastroenterologists. We are not medical doctors. This test is designed, just like we started out at the very beginning, to help you get to the root of some of those symptoms. And like she was saying, if, the calprotectin, the inflammation marker is really high or something, then how do you balance that out with your diet, with possible supplementation? And so that's what we try to coach you on. And it is not perfect. It is not just going to be a linear healing, depending on what your stool test is. It will be a lifestyle change and some tools that you have to use and time and patience. But we do think the GI map test is such a fantastic tool. And Angela, thank you for having us go through all of that, because if our listeners are out there, going, man, this sounds like me. I have some of these symptoms, or I know that I have a parasite, because maybe my gastroenterologist has run that, or I know that my inflammation marker is really high, then this test could be for you. The GI map test and going through some of our coaching programs and things could be right for you. So if you're thinking about the brain fog and the sugar and, some of those things, but it's also for the people, like we talked about before, it's also for the people that are really living a lifestyle where, they're watching their portion sizes. They're eating different macronutrients. They're really focused on, food prepping and exercise, like really all of those pillars of health, right, Angela, that we talk about the pillars of the health. And if you're stressed out all the time and your diet and, the sleep is off and all those things. But if you're doing all of those things really well, it still could be for you. sometimes we explain it as like kind of the last piece of the puzzle, right? Because they're just missing just a little piece of that puzzle to make sure all of those pillars are really sturdy for your optimal health. So again, thank you for going through the test. It's just fascinating and I'm so thankful that I have this as a tool for myself and for my family, which we're going to talk about more on the podcast later, because I have done a stool test on my entire family, and we believe that it is a very important part of us trying to live the lifestyle that we want to. I mean, Todd and I are both in our 40s. We have teenage daughters. And we believe that to have optimal health is looking at this GI map test and really trying to optimize that. So again, thank you for telling us that. Do you or sharing all of that with us? Do you want to say anything before we close out this episode?
No, I think you did a good job. I'll just remind people that this is a good way to stop guessing, right? Think of the emotional fatigue that goes into like the guesswork of like, I think it's this, I think it's that, and you're chasing doctor and you're chasing lab and you're chasing Dr.
Supplements.
Google. Supplements.
Chasing supplements. Like you said, throwing darts at the wall and, to take the guesswork out of it. So if you are interested, find us on one of our platforms. You can go and to our website, gutgirls.health. There is a place that you can book a free consultation so we can talk to you about our programs and about the GI map test and what your options are there. So we would love to chat with you soon, and we hope to catch you on the next episode. The Gut Girls podcast is for educational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. We are not acting as licensed medical professionals. Always consult your doctor before making any changes to your health routine.